Buongiorno, everybody, and welcome back to a new season of Wild Wild Podcast, or The Wild Wild Podcast. I still can't decide whether we have a the or not. Anyway, I am Adrian Smith.
The question of the indefinite article is always a mystery.
Exactly. We will never answer it. I'm Adrian Smith. I'm joined from across the ocean by the Black Duke himself, Rod Barnett.
Ah, if only I were as handsome and suave and talented as Cameron Mitchell.
And would you bring all the spectacle and splendor of a violent, sinful era to the podcast?
I would do my best, yes.
How violent and sinful it is, Tennessee?
It's very cold. The only violence I can think of right now is my near constant need to sneeze. But other than that,
Yeah, the weather has been brutal. But anyway, as it's still technically January and we haven't spoken for ages, Happy New Year.
Oh, thank you very much. Happy New Year to you and yours. How has 2025 treated you so far? And feel free to edit out any curse words before you speak.
Yeah, pretty good. I was in Italy at Christmas, so naturally that was pretty fun. And yeah, we went to Venice, the family, had a few days over Christmas. That was really cool. And I sported my Wild Wild Podcast T-shirt and sort of,
hey, I've heard of you. Aren't you famous?
In the hope that people would say, hey, where did you get that? Yeah, it wasn't to be. Yes, but anyway, it was nice to be back in Italy, and I naturally bought some Diabolic while I was there, as well as lots of delicious food. But 2025, not bad. Already spent too much money on Blu-rays, despite the constant threat to myself that I need to cut down because I don't have anywhere to put them.
Yeah, that's a constant problem for all of us, I think,
Yeah, but there you go. How about you?
The holidays were good, family and friends, nothing too out of the ordinary, some pretty good gifts, including a couple of Blu-ray box sets that I wanted but had not purchased for myself. The big one was a friend of mine picked me up the Columbia Horrors set from Indicator.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. That one's, I think that's like 8 films from the 30s primarily. And I've only seen, I think, a couple of them. So I'm having fun. I just cracked that open recently and watched Behind the Mask, which is an early Karloff film. And looking forward to Black Moon and Airhawks and all the other ones in that set. It's going to be fun. I love exploring, there are huge areas of horror cinema where you think you kind of have a fair handle on it, and then something like this comes out and reminds you, oh, actually no, you just know the more well-known titles. These are the obscure ones. It's time to dig in.
Yeah, I'm glad I will get that set eventually. I was really relieved when I saw that it wasn't called Volume 1.
Thank God they crammed all 8 movies into one set. Yeah.
Just the innate collector in me. If I bought one and then they suddenly here's Volume 2 and Volume 3, I'd be just buying them all. I can't just have one of a thing. I need to have the whole set. So, but I will get that eventually. Those are all good stuff. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we live in an embarrassment of riches with all this stuff constantly coming out and trying to keep up with it and watch them and enjoy them before you move on to the next set is kind of I know it's a first world problem, but it is a problem.
Well,
I've got so many lovely
cinema
things.
fans, it's definitely a problem. We're always spotting those little niches or those individual films that we are just a little frustrated that there's not more attention paid to, and there's no, let's just call it what it is, any kind, there's no hard copy physical media version of it available, and it's kind of frustrating.
Which I guess brings us to our film.
Exactly.
Which is barely available anywhere. But before we talk about the Black Duke, I think we should introduce the season. So I finally, Rod, after 3 years of doing this podcast, I've handed you the reins of our chariot. um, or Carriage, I suppose.
I don't know, man. I was kind of the jerk that pushed us into the Jungle Girl mini season. So
Oh, well, that's true. Yeah, that is true. But here we are for a full season of Rapiers and Ruffles.
uh-huh.
And I wonder if you could just sort of describe what the theme is here for this season.
Okay, well, as one might get the impression from the idea of rapiers and ruffles, this is my term of art for films, to the side of sword and sandal films. These are films that take place in a different type of period with different costuming, often historical dramas instead of fantasy settings. Although the fantasy stuff can creep in from time to time. And these are films
And
that
there's definitely a moment in this film where it looks like some people have just wandered on from the Peplum set next door.
sometimes, yeah, there's a little bit of crossover, and sometimes sometimes it's very clear that the the people making these movies were making the other type of movie, often simultaneously. That's true, but the joys of these films, these are the kind of movies that I've always enjoyed. Going back to my love of things like Robin Hood movies, and basically any film in which people end up squaring off in some kind of rapier sword fight. If we have high adventure, we have people on horseback, and it's not a western. As long as we have castles and intrigue, often more intrigue than is necessary, then I really enjoy this kind of stuff. And of course, this bleeds over a little bit into things like pirate movies and different kind of subgenres that kind of connect to it, and connect to the Rapiers and Ruffles idea. And it's fun. These are primarily going to be adventure films. If they're not trying to adhere to a specific historical event or two, then they're going to be set in a specific historical period generally. And the joy of these movies for me is that they are primarily high entertainment. These are pulpish stories with lots of action and often some really interesting turns of character if we're lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, they're definitely. We talk. Obviously we talk a lot on this podcast about films being unavailable because these are not the big kind of cult films that we tend to get with Italian cinema. These are the forgotten Italian films.
Yeah.
And when and I've done a lot of research on Peplum films before, and many of those were kind of hard to get hold of. But this one is even more obscure. Like looking through the potential films for this season and then trying to locate copies of them, barely any of them have had any kind of home video release or anything. These are very forgotten.
It's kind of frightening how few of them have had any home video attention paid to them at all.
Yeah. And so that will be definitely a recurring theme, is how do we find this film? Is it watchable? And
yes.
But yeah, I like this idea, these sort of costume adventure films. Like you said, that once Peplum was in full swing, they just started reusing character types and stories and presumably just whole scripts, but sticking them, like you said, with some pirates or in a castle or whatever. Like the stories are similar, and I'm sure that on more than one occasion we'll see one of these films and think, oh, did I see a film like that, but it was Hercules? And because obviously, again, they also started using some of those scripts from the Peplums in the Western era as well, because it wasn't that hard to recycle some of those stories. So there's a lot of that going on, but that's how it was. That's why we love this particular era. The late 50s into the 60s was sort of the peak of the Italian film industry, and you can't blame them for recycling. It was just an insane the workload.
Oh no, not at all. I mean, they're all at the heart of these. We're talking about just variations on the adventure story theme.
Yeah. So The Black Duke, this is the film we're starting with. It's not the earliest one that we're going to do. There are some earlier, but I guess it's almost it's like it could be the poster boy for the season. The Black Duke. So it's the Black Duke from 1963, directed by Pino Mercanti, and of course with a lush cinematic orchestral score. Here's a snip. Yeah, so Rod, I've just given my reason for why I think we're starting with this one, but you chose for us to kick off with this one. Is this a particular favorite of yours?
It is. I wouldn't say it's a particular favorite, although I do think it's a very good example of the genre. The reason I wanted to single this one out is I think this may have been one of the first of this particular genre that I saw years ago on a dubiously sourced VHS tape. Sometime back in the 90s, and the print at the time. The reason I say that it's dubiously sourced is my memory is that what I was watching at the time was in black and white. Yeah.
Was it presumably a kind of off-air recording, not an actual VHS release?
It may very well have been. I know that how I saw it was a rental from a mom and pop video store. So I have
okay.
Yeah, I have no idea what the source was, but it stood out in my mind because of Cameron Mitchell being the lead. And my initial thought when I rented it, I remember being at first slightly disappointed that these were not people in knights and armor and things of that nature. This is a very different kind of thing. And that was a mild disappointment before I realized that I was just kind of enjoying the movie, not knowing that it was really supposed to be in color. So... Yeah. It's a very colorful film when you finally get to see it in color. Thank goodness, of course.
Yeah. So the copy that we found is on archive.org, so it's quite easy to find, but it's not great.
No.
The image is all right actually, but it's the sound quality is pretty poor, and there's at least twice where I could hear a dial-up modem in the background.
Yeah, I noticed that myself.
Really weird. So I don't know what's going on there. And there's a couple of other times where the sound just cuts out entirely. But it is the English language tracks. Presumably this was, obviously with Cameron Mitchell being the star, I'm assuming this was originally shot with English in mind. Although I've been unable to find any record at all of any kind of UK or American distribution at the time. I think it was distributed in France and Italy at the cinema, but beyond that, don't know if the English language version was seen anywhere theatrically. Do you know at all?
Not at all. My knowledge of its release boils down to knowing that there doesn't seem to have been any kind of probably legal release of it over here, even on home video. Who knows? It may have shown up sometime in the 60s and played a few drive-ins, but I have no clue.
Yeah, which is... I guess we should just be grateful we've got this at all.
Yeah.
Oh dear. So why don't we start? You mentioned him. So why don't we talk about Cameron Mitchell? A name who will be familiar to pretty much every fan of cult Italian film.
I would hope
but
so.
What do you know him from?
Oh my goodness. Probably the Mario Bava stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. According to the IMDb, he's got over 200 credits.
Oh yeah. I could be cruel and say that one of my earliest recollections is the Toolbox Murders, but I won't do that. So no, Cameron Mitchell was in a blue bajillion films, and always brought his A game, even when I think the material he may have been working with was not particularly fantastic. But For me, I think that I absolutely love I love him in Eric the Conqueror, which has a Mario Bava connection. Blood and Black Lace, of course, is fantastic, and I think that he plays a great Shane character in Knives of the Avengers, again for Mario Bava. I think that if you just looked at those three Bava connected films, you'd think, wow, this guy's amazing. And it's like, yeah, he is.
Yeah.
He's completely amazing. But
Should we? I mean, should we do Knives of the Avenger in this season, or is that not? Does that not count?
that's a Viking movie, and it's
Oh,
kind
is it?
of
Okay, I've never seen that one.
oh, it's very good. And I'm
Okay.
not joking when I say that it's essentially Shane,
Oh, I
because
see. Right.
because it is, yeah.
Mm.
But I mean, Cameron Mitchell was. I mean, what don't get me wrong. He was an American actor, but he did a lot of work in
Mm.
uh, Italian and European cinema
Mm-hmm.
when it became very clear that he was going to be making a lot more money there and have a lot more opportunity. Not that he didn't continue to pop up in a lot of American stuff as well, including
Yeah.
being one of the stars of a television series for like 4 or 5 years, The High Chaparral,
Mm-hmm.
uh, in the late '60s, early '70s. But at the same time,
Yeah.
once again, what Cameron Mitchell's usually remembered for people like us are those appearances in everything from, like I say, some not particularly great horror movies like the Toolbox Murders and The Demon and Silent Scream.
Yeah.
Uh, I absolutely love. There was a movie that I watched repeatedly over and over again in my youth because it was a kind of an HBO staple called My Favorite Year. Have you ever seen it?
No.
Oh, okay. My Favorite Year is a 1982 film. It is a completely hysterical comedy that
Okay.
stars. Well, it was directed by Richard Benjamin, but the real joy is that it stars Peter O'Toole, and it's about a television show, a live variety television show in the '50s. Peter O'Toole is a movie star who's got more than a few alcohol-related problems under his belt, and is brought in to be on this show one week to kind of rejuvenate his career in a way. And let's just say his desire to drink causes more than a few problems. And if you've never seen My Favorite Year, allow me to highly recommend it. And in that
Okay.
film, Cameron Mitchell a plays a gangster that this particular variety show has become famous for mocking on the show. And there's a fantastic scene where Cameron Mitchell's gangster character shows up with his hoods to intimidate the star and cast of this show into not making fun of him publicly anymore, and it is a riot.
Hmm.
Highly recommended. Anything you can catch Cameron Mitchell in, you're going to get a good performance
Yeah.
from him. He's just one of those stalwarts who seem to be able to, like I say, always bring a good turn to whatever he
Hmm.
was doing.
I will add it to my list. I'm just looking at his bio on the IMDb, and one of his nicknames apparently was Uncle Boots.
Really?
So I don't know why. Also, he was a bombardier in the Air Force during World War II, which is pretty cool.
Uh huh.
Yeah. So yeah, an interesting guy, very prolific. Spent most of the '70s on TV, and then spent most of the '80s doing horror films. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, he
I mean, think
he
about this guy's
obviously.
career. He worked with Gary Cooper and
Mm,
Marlon Brando and
hmm
Richard Widmark and Susan Hayward,
hmm
James Cagney, Doris Day. I mean,
Yeah, Orson Welles.
man had a career.
Yeah, and it's always good to see him as the star of a movie. And this it was fun that I guess because this was a new film for me, and as we're stepping into slightly new territory, I felt in safe hands knowing that Cameron Mitchell was the star of this film. So
Yep, yep.
I felt like I had something to hold on to. Do you know what I mean? It's going in.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. He's one of those actors who that even if he's not in the lead role in a film, at least when he's on screen, there's somebody who knows what they're
hmm
doing.
Yeah. Whereas the rest of the cast, I have no clue about any of them.
Oh
Do
yeah,
you are you aware of any of the other cast and things that you've seen them
a
in?
couple of them. Conrado San Martin.
Mm.
Is an actor I know a fair amount about.
He's
Uh,
Spanish, right?
yes, and in all honesty, I know him from. Well, he was in Awful Dr. Orloff
Uh-huh.
for Jess Franco, and he was in
Okay.
another Jess Franco film just about a year later. and then a lot of exactly what you would expect for a European actor whose career is going full tilt in the 60s. So you're talking Eurospy, you're talking spaghetti westerns, and a lot of stuff like that. But there was a period of time where he kind of pretty much retired from doing films, and this was in the 70s. And then in the early 80s, he came back in. He got enticed back into doing movies again. And he pops up in a couple of my favorites, Beast and the Magic Sword for Paul Naschy. Yeah. He has a very pivotal role there. And also, believe it or not, he's also in Lucio Fulci's Conquest, which I have a lot of love for as well. And then, once he got back into making movies and television, he worked steadily throughout the 80s and 90s until he decided to completely retire, well into his later years. And he even was enticed to play a role in that remake of Vampires in 2015 before he passed away.
Oh, right. Yeah, the one film I recognize from his list is his Peplum film, which is Hercules, Sansom, Machiste, and Ursus all kind of teaming up, and it's really funny. It's like called The Invincibles. It's got various titles, but that one is very funny and entertaining, mainly because it was used for the Australian film Hercules Returns, which was in the 90s. This Australian comedy troupe basically just dubbed the entire film with their own dialogue, and it's absolutely hilarious. So it's a bit like sort of MST3K, but instead of just commenting on the film, they're playing all the parts, and that's very funny. So he's in that, so I've seen that one. But yes, I did expect him to have popped up in a couple of Spanish horrors and things.
Yeah, well, if you want to see him in a Spanish horror film, there is 1988's film Edge of the Axe, which is a very late in the cycle Jose Larraz film that I get a lot of joy from. So,
did I ever tell you my Jose Larraz story?
Not sure actually.
Okay, just may as well. It's not really my story. So I used to work at a college in Tunbridge, near Tunbridge Wells in Kent, and one of the art teachers there, like graphic design teacher, got chatting, and he knew I was into horror films, and he happened to mention that when he was a teenager, so back in the 80s, I guess it was, he was a bit older than me, he made friends with a Spanish film director who lived in Tunbridge Wells, and this was Jose Larraz.
Oh, okay.
Because he came and lived in the UK for years, and he used to hang out at his house and talk about art, and Jose Larraz would encourage him with the stuff he was doing and all this. And then he said, and I kind of lost touch with him because he went back to Spain, and he's been dead years, and I haven't, And then one day I just happened to catch the news that Jose Larraz had died. So I went to see this guy, and I was like, so hey, Jose Larraz, he wasn't dead, but he is now. And it was kind of sad that he'd lost touch with this guy, but they'd been really good friends for years, and he had been alive the whole time, but just in Spain.
That is sad. I'm now depressed. Thank you, Adrian.
So yeah, but it was just so random that Jose Larraz lived in Tunbridge Wells, which is as bad as, for those of you who don't know Tunbridge Wells, it's basically a town that you wouldn't imagine having any connections with Spanish horror cinema at all. So it's quite fun. Anyway, moving on. Loads of other characters. This is a very characterful film. That's not the right word, but this is a film full of characters to the point where I started to lose track as to who was who and who was involved in which bit, because there's various plots and subplots.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. It's very complicated in its political intrigue subplots.
But it's basically, let's just briefly mention. So the other main characters we've got. So Cameron Mitchell is playing Cesare Borgia. So this film is a very much fictionalized account from the life of Cesare Borgia.
Yeah.
Who was the son of Pope Alexander and the brother of Lucrezia Borgia. And doesn't really bear much relation to actual truth about Cesare Borgia. In fact, I don't believe he was ever even called the Black Duke.
Well, yeah,
As far as I can tell.
So I don't know that that's I don't know that that's historically accurate at all. Yeah.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, I did read a fairly recent biography of Lucrezia Borgia, because obviously there have been other films made just about her, and they don't play up on it in this film, but she has these kind of legends of Lucrezia Borgia being this evil woman who poisoned people, slept with her brother, and had all these husbands and killed people. You know, like, she's got this terrible reputation, which has been played up in a few different exploitation films over the years. But the thrust of this biography was that none of it was true. So I was quite pleased in a way that they didn't play up on that much in this one. And she's not this poisoner. She actually has a ring to detect poison, which I'm not sure if that's something that could actually exist. But she doesn't poison anybody. She doesn't sleep with her brother. There's none of that in this movie, which I thought was good. So she's played by Dina DeSantis. She has an amazing hair. The first time we meet her, she's got this incredibly intricate hairstyle. It's really quite impressive. I don't know how to describe it.
Well, 60s? It says 60s to me. That's something that I'm always amused by. With not that there wasn't great attention to the hairstyles of the people, especially the wealthy people of this particular time period. But this is a story that's supposed to take place somewhere around the year 1500 or so, and I look at it and I go, "Wow, man! So they had the same bouffant weird stand on your ends hairstyles as they had in the 60s. It's very, very, very good that those styles come around again and again and again. But the look of
it's amazing.
Yeah, the look is astonishing. It's one of those things that you can't turn away from and ignore after you've seen it. But I will say that I was impressed with the costuming throughout this thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the costumes are great. And she had a really prolific career in the 50s and 60s. Lots of peplums, Euro spies, all kinds of good stuff. She's in some more respectable films as well, like Juliet of the Spirits and Fellini's 8½. And then, like many actresses, she kind of stopped working by the end of the decade. And then it says that she died when she was only 41, which is very sad.
Oh, that is sad.
But other than that, I don't know anything about her. There's very little biographical information out there about her. But but she's good in this film. And there's two other female leads. There is Cesare Borgia he has a castle under siege, and this is Caterina Sforza's castle. Now she is a historical character. She was in league with France, and Cesare Borgia's mission in this film seems to be to try and create a united Italy. I mean, he's about 400 years too early, really. But it's kind of weird because in real life, the Borgia family were constantly making alliances with Spain and with France at different points. They'd kind of go back and forth between who they were making alliances with. So it seems funny that he's sort of trying to start a war with the French here, because in reality, the Borgias at this point were probably good mates with the French. But anyway, so he's putting this castle under siege. So Caterina Sforza is played by an actress called Gloria Milland,
which is a stage name. Yeah.
She's from Sicily.
She's actually an Italian actress whose name was Maria Faye. Fie.
Okay. And again, lots of peplums and
lots and lots of peplums, including some that are rather famous. She was in Fury of Achilles and The Rebel Gladiators, Revenge of the Musketeers, Hercules Against the Barbarians.
Yeah. Oh, and let's not forget Sexy Party.
Sexy Party. I missed Sexy Party. I don't know how I did that.
This is a film we have to fit into another mini season at some point. The plot summary is amazing. A party of young people gather in a mansion for an occult experiment in which deaths are predicted by a psychic. Soon it turns into more than an experiment.
Okay, you are correct. We do need to see
That
this film.
sounds
Yes,
great.
I agree with you, sir.
Oh dear. Yeah. Um, yeah, lots of good stuff there. And she's not in the film very much, but when she's in it, she's in charge. She's telling the men what to do. She even gets to wear trousers.
And from what I understand, at least that aspect of the character that she's playing, the actual historical character she's playing, that seems to be accurate the way they portray
Yeah.
her, because that historical figure really was very much like the character we see in the movie, which was nice to discover.
Mm. Yeah, it's great with she's getting ready to fight and she comes out in a pair of trousers and you're like, oh yeah, here we go.
Uh huh.
This is a modern woman. And then the third female character to juggle, Cesare is kind of juggling all these women, is Generva,
Yeah.
and we'll explain her role in a minute. She was from Venice, Maria Grazia Spina. Um, don't know very much about her either. Can't really find out anything about any of them, except that she had a bit of a longer career. She was still working in the 80s. But again, mainly these kinds of movies.
Yeah, she even turned up in like Violent Naples in the '70s, and
Mm.
a few other movies that we might have run across in
Hmm.
various other seasons in this particular podcast. But in the '60s, she's of course making a lot of peplums, just like everybody else.
And she plays one of Lot's daughters in that epic John Huston film, The Bible.
Oh well,
So, which
uh,
is quite fun.
quite a few thousand actors in that film. So
Yeah, pop up in that. Yeah. Yeah. So, and then finally, the other, I guess the main character to mention is Ricardo. Oh no, we've done that. I think that's all of them then, isn't it? There's a few supporting characters, but I think,
well, as far as that actress is concerned, she's got a pretty good role in a film that I really enjoyed, which is an
oh, go
Italian
on.
pirate movie called Tiger of the Seven Seas from 1962. That's
Oh yeah,
actually a film
that'll
that's
be in
got
our pirate season.
probably so. It's got there are a couple of very strong female characters in that particular movie, and it's well worth
Mm.
seeking out, folks. It's very
Oh,
entertaining.
cool. Very good. Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think there's anyone else we need to mention particularly. So we should also mention the director, of course,
Yes.
who again, somebody I am very unfamiliar with, Pino Mercanti, who, oh, actually, I did do a bit of research on him. He was quite cool. Uh, I just remembered. Yeah, so he's also from Sicily,
Uh-huh.
and he didn't make a lot of films compared with other directors around that time. I mean, the films that he has made, have you seen any of them
Yes, actually,
before?
I'll have to admit that Night of 100 Faces is a movie he made in 1960 with Lex Barker that I sought
Uh-huh.
out several years back. Of course, it's just another illegal download that I was able to find, thank goodness. But it's a very good. I enjoyed the heck out of it. That title rang a bell immediately, and I was like, oh yeah, I've seen that one. Uh, and I tried to find at one point or another his one of his Eurospy films called Special Code Assignment Lost Formula, which
Oh yeah.
stars Lang Jeffries, but I haven't been able to run across a copy of that yet. But it wasn't because I was trying to run down the films of this particular director. It's just because I was in the Eurospy mode at that time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've like I say, seen a couple of his movies, but gotta say, so far the ones that I've seen, and it's a very small number, I gotta say I think I like this one the best.
Mm. Yeah, he was an interesting guy. He, like I said, he's from Sicily, which is was always a lot more sort of poverty in Sicily compared to Rome and the north of Italy. And he organised a company, basically a sort of production company, to promote producing films in Sicily. And they made some sort of Italian neo-realist style films, but then the company went bankrupt and he went to Rome and ended up making, yeah, sort of stuff like this. The films that were actually going to make him some money. And he had a fairly successful career for a good 20 years, really.
Yeah, up until really the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah. So I'm not sure exactly why. He just basically seems to have retired.
Well, I mean, I have to admit, he was born in 1911, so I think by the time, I mean, he was making films in the late 40s in Italy. So by the time by the time we're in the 70s, he's getting up there in years, and so I think he may have segued off into, I mean, he passed away in 1986, so I think he just may have gone to other fields. I'm not positive.
Yeah, just retired, maybe. Put his feet up. Yeah, but I found... I did find a bit of a biography about him in La Repubblica, the Italian newspaper, and they say there that nobody knows that much about him. So I've been unable to find any interviews with him at all, and nobody seems to know much about about his personal life at all, which is kind of a shame. But yeah, so just another person to throw into our ever-widening net of directors I've never heard
obscure Italian genre directors.
Yeah, but at least we have now. So there, The Black Duke. I have searched high and low, and this is even more obscure, it seems, than some of the films we did on our psychedelic season. I've been unable to find any published review or even half-decent plot summary.
Wow.
There are 3 user reviews on IMDb, and there are, I think, 2 very short reviews of this film on Letterboxd. And that's basically it. It seems like hardly anybody in the whole of the internet has watched this film.
Well, one of the stranger things, and you may have seen this as well, is that in the more expansive, and that's not very expansive, plot summaries that I have read seem to get a weird detail about the film incorrect.
I know what you mean,
Yeah, because it stands out pretty hard.
It's like it was written by somebody who hasn't watched it, or maybe they watched it in black and white, like you.
Now, see, that I'm wondering about. So it goes like this. One of the many plot elements within the structure of the story of the Black Duke is a group of people who are working against Cesare Borgia, attempting to bring him down and eventually kill him. And they call themselves the Red Carnations. Now, this stands out pretty firmly because the Red Carnation is said repeatedly throughout the film, and the movie being in color, they use red carnations.
And when they meet in their secret meetings, they all wear red hoods.
Exactly. So it becomes this obvious thing, and yet every single... I mean, granted, that's only like 3 or 4. But anytime I'm seeing someone try to describe the plot of this, they describe it as the Black Carnation. And I'm going, this is very odd.
Which makes me wonder if people saw it not only in black and white, but also with a different dub or something.
Maybe.
Because they talk about the red carnation all the time. And there is no such thing as a black carnation. Carnations don't grow black, as far as I'm aware.
I mean, I could see using it as kind of a code name or a name for a group, but that's not what's going on, at least in the English dub.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. But yeah, there's a very few people seem to have watched this movie since 1963, and I mean, you watched it on video. You might have been the first person to borrow that tape. From that shop.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no memory of how much dust may have been on the case. I'm not sure.
So yeah. Now, because normally I like to find somebody else's plot summary to help us go through, but we haven't got one. So the best I can do is and I'm loath to use it, is a combination of the IMDb plot summary and the Wikipedia plot summary. And weirdly, the Wikipedia one doesn't mention the Red Carnations at all, which is funny because at the beginning of the film, I assumed that was going to be the main thrust of the movie. Like, it made me think of the Scarlet Pimpernel. I wondered if that's where they'd borrowed that idea from.
Maybe.
because again, there's no historical basis in the Red Carnation, but the idea of a kind of hooded hero slash secret organization made me think of the sort of Scarlet Pimpernel, which there were also film adaptations of around this time. But yeah, the Wikipedia summary doesn't mention it at all. But my question to you, Rod, is who is the hero of this movie?
Aha. Now, you're getting to one of the most fascinating things about this movie for me, which is, okay,
Good.
so when I sat down to watch it, this past week for the first time in decades, and was shocked to learn that it was in color because that was not my memory of it. The first thing, about halfway through the movie, I thought I had a handle on what we were looking at here, which is why they would possibly title this story The Black Duke, is that I figured what this was going to be was some kind of very fictionalized account of the taking down of Cesare, right? This is the death of a Borgia. That's what we're going to see. Yeah. But as the film as the film goes on, we are privy to this group of people called the Red Carnation who are working against him, and we're aware that the person who's calling himself the Red Carnation is someone who's probably within the inner circle of Borgia, and so that's there's a little bit of a mystery as to who it's going to turn out to be. But then the film presents us with so much detail and so much information about Cesare, and he's so charmingly played, to be honest, by Cameron Mitchell, that the movie, I thought for a very long period of time, was doing that very wise and cruel thing to an audience, which is to get you to side with the main character, who is in actuality the bad guy that the other characters in the film are working against, trying to take down. That is not what this really seems to be. This seems to be an attempt to present a multifaceted picture of Cesare Borgia and the period, a certain particular period of his life, and all of the strange things that he was working against. He comes off as a very complex character who is doing things that are good and bad, and he doesn't come off. You don't come away thinking he's a villain, except that he is centered in the story, and so many of the other characters seem to be working against him. That's the structure of this kind of story, to make you think that the end of the story is going to be him being taken down by other people looking to take his power from him. But that is not the point of this film. This really does seem to be an attempt to play a particular period of his life and to give you a complex portrait of this guy and what he was doing to stay in power, get things, put things into place, to have grander schemes down the road, finally flower into being. It's kind of interesting because it's not the kind of film that you think it's going to be, because there's a fair amount of cool, fighting and adventuring. There are some pretty great battles, but the film does have a lot of speeches and a lot of intrigue, and so that might slow the movie down for some people. But it's all that stuff that really kind of makes all the action sequences pay off, and it turns out to be kind of a strange, kind of mostly fictionalized biography, biopic of this character, and I don't know if I like it more because of that, but I certainly don't dislike it because of that.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not cliched, I suppose.
No, it's not. Which I kind of, I'll tell you this. That's kind of what I was expecting, and kind of, had set my mind toward. So it was a bit weird to have it be something a little more high-minded.
I suppose because he keeps talking about creating a united Italy. Yeah. And obviously Italy did eventually become united like 400 years later. So perhaps the filmmakers don't want to make Cesare a straightforward bad guy because what he was attempting to do was something that was good in the eyes of the Italians. You know, I mean, they celebrate the unification of Italy. It's called I think they refer to it as the Risorgimento, and they refer to it everywhere you go. Like in every town and village and city in Italy, they had squares renamed and statues put up and streets renamed. So wherever you are, even some of the places we were in Venice, you can't walk another 10 feet without bumping into another statue of some hero of the war with Austria and the unification and all of that stuff. So I guess in some ways what he's doing is a good thing because he's fighting against the French. But then they also make Caterina Sforza really cool, so you want her to beat him.
Yeah, and they're fighting against each other, but at the same time, you kind of admire both of them for what they're doing.
Yeah, and you've got the Red Carnation, and I won't give away who it is because nobody listening to this has probably seen the film yet. So we don't want to give that away because it's quite fun, I think. But yeah, so you've got this organization, and the Red Carnation is giving out assignments to people to assassinate the Black Duke, and they keep getting it wrong. And so this is where Geneva comes in, whose father had been killed by the Black Duke, I believe. So she accepts the assignment to get, it's a very specific assignment, to get Cesare to fall in love with her so that she can become part of his inner circle, and then she can kill him. That's her mission. But then she, perhaps unsurprisingly, because he's such a charmer, she falls in love with him for real, and he falls in love with her. And then we get this great scene, typical with every single Peplum film and a lot of other films like this, is the banqueting scene, and suddenly somebody kind of claps their hands and a load of dancing girls come in. And this was the bit where I just felt these dancing girls have just stepped off Hercules next door, because they were wearing the same costumes. Like, I've seen that dance, probably those same dance moves, in about 10 Peplum movies.
And you've enjoyed them every time.
Oh, absolutely. It's a staple of the genre, that these girls come in with their veils and do that dance. But I thought it was really funny that they didn't even try and put them in medieval clothes. They look like they're all dressed like Aladdin, doing the dance. The trouble is, though, Rod, as well, in the last couple of years, I've probably watched too many Joe D'Amato films, because when there's some kind of big royal feast or party or something like this, I'm just half expecting somebody to bring in a horse any minute, or a couple of dwarves.
Lord. Yes, you've seen too many Joe D'Amato films. This is true.
So I was, I was grateful that we didn't go there.
Well, I got to ask you a question about this. Like I said, we've talked about how the film kind of presents, different facets of the character that Cameron Mitchell's playing, and the one truly nasty, cruel thing that we see him doing is when he goes way out of his way to get under the skin of one of his adherents, one of his people, who's known to be very jealous of his beautiful wife. And he goes way out of his way to publicly flirt with that woman.
Oh yeah, but he's playing the long game there.
And that's
it's
the
a
thing.
very clever little scheme that he's
right.
put in motion there by humiliating his friend.
Yeah, and it's like that's kind of in the center part of the film, the middle third, and you're starting to, at that point is where it felt once again as if the movie were pushing you in the direction of not liking this character, so that if he's killed at the end, you'd feel a certain amount of justification. But the movie it does not go in that direction. It goes a different way with the way that even this intense flirtation is going. He's got something else on his mind, and it's just
he's got something up his sleeve.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in this movie.
Up his big sleeve.
Well, yes. Well, the costuming is top notch, and Cameron Mitchell's facial hair is on point.
It's worth mentioning that Cameron Mitchell was about 45 when he plays this role, whereas the real Cesare Borgia died when he was 31.
He plays him like a much younger man. There's a lot of energy in this performance.
They reckon he was wearing a mask because his face was disfigured from syphilis.
Oh, wow.
But that wasn't what killed him. He did die basically in a raid that went wrong, and he got killed by the enemy soldiers. And he was found dead and found naked and dead in the woods when his men finally found him.
Wow.
So he came to an ignoble end.
Well, I'm wondering, since you brought up earlier how much public attention with all the statues is played in Italy to the people who brought the country together, do you think that maybe a character like Cesare Borgia, who was attempting to do this particular thing, centuries before it actually happened, that would make it more likely that they would, when making a piece of fiction about him, present him in a much more heroic fashion than other, another filmmaker from another country might?
Yeah. It's interesting because I don't think the Borgia family are generally considered to be
heroic.
And there was a film, wasn't there, a TV show a few years ago with Jeremy Irons about the Borgias, and there's all these kind of legends around the Borgias.
Yeah. Some of them are a little over the top and don't turn out to be all that accurate, but there's still a lot there. In
the Lucrezia Borgia book I read, it talks about orgies in the Vatican that Alex the Pope, their dad, who was the Pope, just worth mentioning that the Pope had loads of kids and was holding orgies in the Vatican. And there are some quite alarming stories in there involving nuns.
Uh-huh.
So the Borgias were definitely, pushing the boundaries. But it's kind of interesting that he, on the surface, yes, he's the perfect person to make as your villain in a historical action movie. But then they make it more nuanced, which, maybe it's hard to say, isn't it? Maybe that's the writers, maybe that's the director who was making neo-realist films sort of in his early career and wants to be more honest as a filmmaker and
possibly
doesn't want his characters to just be as black and white as that. It's hard to say.
But they are not. There are definite shades of gray in the main character, which is just not exactly what I was expecting from a film of this vintage and of this genre.
Yeah, hard to say. But I enjoyed this. It's great. Oh, and I love the castle. The first time we see the castle, I assumed it was a matte painting.
Oh, but no, it's real.
It's like a real massive, and I'd love to know where it is. I've been trying to research it, but not had any luck.
There's not a lot of information on this movie.
No. What I should probably do is try and get a screenshot of the castle and then do a Google Lens search and see if I can find a matching picture of the castle, because I'd love to know where it is. It's an amazing location, and it's all shot for real, where Borgia's troops have camped outside trying to put this castle under siege, and it's an amazing location.
I would just also, just as another point, although it was not always something that Cameron Mitchell did or was allowed to do, he does provide his own voice in the English dub for this film, and that adds a lot to his performance, I think. And also there are a number of fencing scenes, even some that aren't in the heat of battle. There's some that are just people essentially practicing against each other, and they're all good. They're exciting.
They are just having such a great time. But the looks on their faces, they're like, ha ha, ho ho. And then so when you see them fighting for real, they've got that same big smile on their faces, even though they're just cutting people to the ground.
Even though there are people who are, being murdered right next to them or by them.
They're just loving every minute of it, which is quite fun. There's lots of good sword play. And just in general, I think this is a great one to kickstart the season.
And it will be a good example of the kind of film that, honestly, more people should know. This is a I'm not going to say it's a great movie, but it is far and away a fine example of this genre that we're talking about, and it would be hard.
Yeah.
You would have to really be a sourpuss to watch this thing and to not find a way to enjoy at least big chunks of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we could say it's a great movie. Obviously, great is relative, but
Right.
in terms of what was going on in Italy in the early 60s and the speed in which they're turning these around and the sort of budgetary restraints and so on and so on and so on, they do a lot with what they've got, and especially using that real location, which is a real gift to this genre, having castles like that in Italy. Obviously really helps. They haven't got to worry too much about building fantastical sets like they did with the Hercules films, where they just need loads of pillars to prop up everywhere. They've just got all this great stuff out there to go and shoot, and it works really well.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was good. I enjoyed it. I hope more people watch it.
This is a good film. This is a good film. I like this a lot.
Yeah. So that is our recommendation, and hopefully we'll have more to recommend as we go through the season.
Fingers crossed.
I don't think we've picked which one we're going to do next yet, but we'll get on that soon. We should add, there may be a slight delay. And one of the reasons this has been a bit long coming is because Rod and I have both been lucky enough to be offered various different DVD extra jobs, but that does kind of then slow down everything else.
Yes.
So, but hopefully we'll get to the next episode in the not too distant future. I wanted to mention a couple of things. First of all, we had some emails in the break, so I just quickly wanted to read out a couple of those.
Oh, cool.
We had an email from Mike, I should say, and he says, "I've been enjoying some of your earlier podcast episodes this morning." This was on the 28th of December, so we are the perfect festive listening. And so he said, enjoying some of your earlier podcast episodes, such as Escape from Galaxy 3 and Cosmos War of the Planets. These films have been favourites of mine for years, and it's nice to learn more about them and to find anyone that has an interest in them whatsoever. Yes, Cosmos, not so much, but Escape from Galaxy 3, that is like that is a full 5-star film for me.
For you, yes. If he's listened to the episode, he'll know that there was a bit of a split between the hosts here.
Yes, I know. He also says, "I've enjoyed the recent LSD psychedelic series, but perhaps more than the actual films." Well, I mean, that's fair. He also mentions the documentary The Outsider, which is the film that Eduardo Margariti made about his dad. Apparently it's on Tubi. So
yeah, that's a good documentary. It's only about an hour long, and it's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, it used to be very hard to get hold of that, and it was only available in Italian. And then it was put on as a bonus on something by Severin, I think, so you could finally watch it with subtitles.
Yeah, I think it's on the Alien from the Abyss.
So now it's finally out there on Tubi. So yeah, well worth watching if you have any interest at all, which if you're listening to this.
You probably do.
Then Mike says, "Looking forward to some new podcast episodes in 2025. Yes, me too. Thanks, Mike.
We're working on it, as this is evidence of.
Yeah. So another thing that I've been working on over the Christmas break was getting us into a podcast network, which has long been a goal of mine, but I wasn't really aware of any, particularly apart from the ones that all the big podcasters hang out in. But then I discovered Film Stories, which is it's a film magazine here in the UK, and they have a podcast network which is specifically for film podcasts. So long story short, we are now part of the Film Stories podcast network. I'm still not entirely sure what that's going to mean, but in the short term it means we've changed from Acast to a different host, which is basically Spotify, I think. You'll probably hear a Film Stories sting at the beginning of this episode, I think, or you will have heard it. But basically it means better, more marketing for us. We'll get advertised on their various social medias and also in the printed magazine, potentially, occasionally. So hopefully it's just another way of helping the podcast to find new audiences. So quite excited about that and to see where that takes us in 2025.
Excellent news.
yeah, we also have the TeePublic store up and running. Some of you I've seen have bought t-shirts, so thank you very much.
Fantastic.
I think there's if you're listening to this soon after I've put it out, there's currently like a 20% off everything sale. They seem to do that quite often, so just keep an eye on it, and at some point you'll get 20% off. So yeah, worth watching out for that. But yeah, so the podcast is going from strength to strength, and I'm excited for 2025. We seem to be averaging at the moment, Rod, like one full season and one mini season a year.
That's not bad.
That's pretty good. We've hit our rhythm there, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
there's a reason for that level of output. I mean, we're constantly getting interrupted by having to go off and do a commentary job here and there. So
I know, yeah, and obviously real life, but we're happy to be here and to do this, and we're happy that you're listening. Whew, I think I'll stop talking now. Please do get in touch. The easiest way, another thing I've done, the easiest way to get in touch with us is just to use the Linktree link on the show notes, and you can send us a message through that. You can also find our Instagram and Twitter links, and all that stuff, the YouTube, all of that kind of thing. But yeah, it's all in one place now, so you can send us an email if you want to, but the easiest thing to do is just to send us a message through Linktree. So just use the link in the show notes. I've tried to keep it easy. Instead of having 15 different links, there's just one now. So I'd be interested to see if that works, if anybody wants to give that a go. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Rod, what have you got coming out in the foreseeable future that people should listen for?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so right now I'm not sure exactly what's going on in the next month or so for the various podcasts that that I'm involved with, other than this one. But the got an episode of The Bloody Pit coming out soon, where Mark Maddox and I finally wrap up the first 6 Star Trek films, the ones with the original cast members, and we had a lot of fun with that, although we did talk for nearly 2.5 hours, and for that I apologize.
Wow.
But that's coming out.
Hey, do you know what you guys should do? If you're doing the Star Trek movies, did you know that there was another Star Trek movie made before Star Trek the motion picture?
What?
Yeah. It's called Oma the Tourist in Star Trek, and it is a Turkish film from 1973. I have seen this, so I know it exists. And it's a comedy Turkish rip-off of Star Trek about a Turkish guy who accidentally gets beamed up into Star Trek world.
Oh, it's the Turkish Star Trek film.
Yeah.
Okay.
Turkish Star Trek, and they use the story of the pilot episode of Star Trek, so they kind of replay that, but it's comedy, and it's great. I'm throwing that to you. Once you run out of Star Trek films, you should do Turkish Star Trek.
Well, thank you for throwing that at me. I'm going to throw it right back at you.
throw it back. And I've seen it. It's really funny. You wouldn't be disappointed.
I think I think that phrase "wouldn't be disappointed" is carrying a lot of water, and possibly the pail that you're carrying that water in has several holes. I mean, sorry. I might watch it, but I don't know that I would ever try to talk Mark Maddox into covering it, because I think he would probably drive up from Florida to try to slit my throat. So no.
Or he just come all the way over to Eastbourne to make me pay for suggesting it. But sorry, I interrupted you. So you've got that coming soon.
Oh, well, that, and I'll be honest, I'm not really sure exactly what's coming up next, because I've got so many different things on the boil. I'm not sure which one's going to be ready for public consumption first. I really don't. So bear with me. Star Trek 6 coming very soon. Things after that, not positive quite yet. Sorry.
That's all right. But stay tuned for Omer the Tourist in Star Trek on the Bloody Pit.
No. Cult comedy science fiction film produced by people who are insane. No.
Yeah. Anyway, it's on YouTube. Everyone else, if Rod's never going to do it, you should just watch it anyway. I highly recommend it. But obviously, you guys, I think you know me well enough by now to know that I've got a high tolerance for international comedy.
Yes, you do. And much too high a tolerance. It's like I think whatever you watched as a youth must have infected you in some bizarre way.
Yeah, possibly. Anyway, okay, I think that's all to say. I don't think either of us have any recently announced Blu-ray releases to speak of.
No, not at the moment. There are a lot of things on the boil there too.
Exciting things coming, but nothing we can mention just yet. Phew. Okay, it's good to be back. Join us again soon for more Rapiers and Sandals, or no, Rapiers and Sandals.
Rapiers and Ruffles.
Rapiers and Ruffles, or swords and thigh-high leather boots.
What is that? What is that piece of clothing that these characters are wearing around their loins that are very puffy? I'd like to find out what the name of that is.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's not a bodkin. That's something else.
No, I don't know what that is.
No idea. Any medieval fashion experts listening, please do get in touch.
True. Yes, help us.
Okay. Right, I'm going to hop back onto my horse now and ride off into the forest.
I'm going to grab my rapier and accidentally cut myself.
Yeah. Rod's going to pull up the drawbridge and
and refuse to watch the Turkish Star Trek film.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks Rod. We'll be back soon. Bye for now.
Bye everyone.